You know that feeling when you're scrolling through your phone at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, and suddenly you stop? Not because you found something interesting, but because for a split second you caught a glimpse of your own reflection in the dark screen. And in that moment, something inside you whispered, "This isn't the life you were supposed to be living." You see yourself there, frozen in that dim reflection, and you feel this weight in your chest, this quiet desperation that you've been carrying for so long you forgot it wasn't supposed to be there. You've been going through the motions day after day, following the script that was written for you before you even knew how to read. Wake up, work, consume, distract yourself, sleep, repeat. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking if this is what you actually want, because asking that question feels dangerous. It feels like opening a door you might not be able to close. But here's the thing, that whisper you heard, that uncomfortable feeling that made you stop scrolling, that wasn't weakness. That wasn't you failing at life. That was the sound of something in you refusing to stay silent anymore. That was your own existence knocking on the door, asking to be let back in. There's this peculiar weight that settles on people when they start to realize their life isn't really theirs. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or drama. It arrives quietly, in small moments. Maybe you're sitting in a meeting, nodding along to something you don't care about, and you catch yourself wondering how you ended up here. Or you're having a conversation with someone you're supposed to be close to, and you realize you're performing, saying what you think you should say rather than what you actually feel. These moments accumulate like sediment at the bottom of a river, slowly burying something essential underneath. The tragedy isn't that life becomes unbearable. Often it becomes perfectly bearable. That's actually the problem. You adapt, you adjust, you become functional within a framework that was never designed for your actual flourishing. You learn the acceptable ways to be sad, the appropriate times to be happy, the correct amount of ambition to display, the proper way to love. And without realizing it, you become an expert at being someone else's version of you. Most people, when they start feeling this disconnection, this sense that something fundamental is wrong, they do what they've been trained to do. They try to fix themselves. They read the self-help books that promise transformation in 7 steps. They adopt new morning routines, new productivity systems, new diets, new mindsets. They go to therapy and try to locate the childhood wound that explains everything. They meditate, they journal, they do the work. And none of it is wrong, exactly. But something keeps missing, because they're trying to become a better version of the person they think they're supposed to be without ever questioning whether that person is who they actually are. It's like rearranging furniture in a house you never chose to live in. You can make it more comfortable, more aesthetic, more aligned with your values, but you're still in the wrong house. The fundamental architecture of your existence remains unexamined, unchallenged, unchanged. You're optimizing a life that might not be yours to begin with. Here's where everything shifts, where the ground beneath your feet starts to move in a way that's both terrifying and liberating. What if the problem isn't that you're broken? What if the problem is that you've been constructed, carefully and systematically, to be something other than what you are? This is where Michel Foucault enters the conversation, not as an abstract philosopher in an ivory tower, but as someone who spent his life studying exactly this question. How do we become who we are? And more importantly, how much of who we are is actually a product of forces we never consented to? Foucault talked about something he called technologies of the self. Not technologies in the sense of gadgets and apps, but rather the entire apparatus of techniques, practices, institutions and discourses that shape how we understand and create ourselves. From the moment you're born, you're entered into systems of knowledge and power that tell you what it means to be a person, what it means to be a good person, a successful person, a normal person. These aren't just ideas floating in the air, they're embedded in everything. In the way schools evaluate you, in the way doctors diagnose you, in the way employers measure you, in the way social media platforms quantify your worth through likes and followers. You learn to see yourself through these lenses, to evaluate yourself by these metrics, to discipline yourself according to these norms. And the brilliant, terrifying thing is that you don't experience this as oppression. You experience it as just how things are, as common sense, as your own natural desires and choices. But Foucault's real insight, that makes his work so transformative rather than just depressing, is that if we are constructed, then we can be reconstructed. If the self is something that gets made, then it's something that can be remade, not through some mystical process of discovering your true authentic self that was always there waiting to be found. That's actually part of the trap, this idea that there's a real you buried underneath all the conditioning, and if you just dig deep enough you'll find it. No, what Foucault suggests is more radical and more honest. You are always in the process of becoming. There is no fixed essence to discover. There's only the ongoing practice of self-creation, and the question isn't who am I really, but rather who do I want to become, and what practices, what ways of living will allow me to create that. This is what he means by practices of freedom. Not freedom as the absence of constraints, because we're always constrained by something, always existing within systems and structures, but freedom as the ability to consciously work on yourself, to cultivate yourself deliberately, rather than letting yourself be cultivated by forces you never chose. It's the difference between being a product and being an artist, between being shaped and being the shaper. The transition from one mode of existence to another is never clean or simple. You don't just wake up one day and decide to be free, and then, poof, you're free. What happens instead is more like living between two worlds. You start to see the mechanisms that have been operating on you, shaping you, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. It's like suddenly becoming aware of your own breathing. You've been breathing your whole life without thinking about it, and now that you're aware of it, it feels strange, effortful, like you have to manually do something that used to happen automatically. You find yourself in conversations where you can see yourself performing, hitting the expected notes. And part of you is watching this performance with a kind of detached fascination, thinking, why am I saying this? Who is this for? But you keep saying it anyway because the alternative, just stopping mid-sentence and being honest, feels impossibly vulnerable. You go to work and do the tasks you're supposed to do, but there's this growing awareness that you're participating in a game whose rules you never agreed to, whose prizes you don't actually want. And the strangest thing is that no one around you seems to notice that it's a game. Or if they do notice, they've decided it's the only game in town, so they might as well play it well. This in-between place is uncomfortable because you can't go back to unconsciousness, to just going through the motions without thinking about them. But you also haven't yet figured out how to live differently. Foucault would say this discomfort is actually productive. It's the crack where change becomes possible. Because as long as everything feels natural and inevitable, as long as you experience your life as just the way things are, there's no space for transformation. But when things start to feel strange, when you start to experience your own existence as something constructed rather than given, that's when you can begin the work of reconstruction. The old structures are still there, still exerting their pull, still offering their rewards and punishments, but they've lost their total grip on you. You're becoming aware of what Foucault calls governmentality, the ways you've learned to govern yourself according to external norms, to be your own supervisor, your own judge, your own prison guard. And with that awareness comes the possibility of governing yourself differently, of setting different standards, of measuring yourself by metrics you actually choose. There's a woman I heard about. I'll call her Sarah, though that's not her real name. Sarah spent 15 years building a successful career in corporate law. She was good at it. She made partner at 35, had the apartment in the nice part of the city, the wardrobe, the vacation home, all the markers of success. But somewhere around year 12, she started having this recurring dream. In the dream, she's sitting in a courtroom, but she's both the lawyer and the defendant, and she's prosecuting herself for crimes she doesn't understand. She wakes up with her heart racing, unable to shake the feeling that she's guilty of something. At first, she does what successful people do when they experience discomfort. She works harder. She goes to therapy. She starts training for a marathon because having a goal outside of work is supposed to bring balance. But nothing touches this feeling. Then one day, she's in a deposition, and the opposing counsel asks a question, and Sarah opens her mouth to give the strategic answer, the one that serves her client's interests, and instead she just stops. The silence stretches out. Everyone's looking at her. And in that moment, she realizes she has absolutely no idea why she became a lawyer. She can remember Anne. The logic of it, how it made sense at the time, how her parents were proud, how it was a smart move. But she can't locate any genuine desire in it, any actual choosing. The next 6 months were messy. She didn't immediately quit her job or have some dramatic breakdown. But she started asking herself a question she'd never really asked before. What do I actually care about? Not what should I care about, not what looks impressive to care about, but what genuinely moves me. And the answers that came back surprised her. They weren't particularly impressive or ambitious. She wanted to spend more time with her sister's kids. She wanted to make things with her hands. She wanted to have conversations that didn't feel like chess games. Eventually, she did leave corporate law. She's not living some perfect Instagram-worthy alternative life now. She teaches at a community college and runs legal clinics for people who can't afford representation. She makes a third of what she used to make, but when I heard her talk about it, what struck me was that she seemed to inhabit her own skin in a way she hadn't before, like she'd stopped being a very good actor playing Sarah and had become Sarah herself. So how does this actually work? How do you move from recognizing that you've been constructed according to someone else's blueprint to actively constructing yourself according to your own vision? Foucault doesn't give us a step-by-step manual, because that would defeat the whole point. Giving you another set of rules to follow, another program to optimize yourself according to, would just be replacing one form of external control with another. Instead, what he offers is something more like a practice, an ongoing engagement with yourself that doesn't have a finish line. It starts with what he calls critique. Not critique in the sense of being negative or finding fault, but critique as a fundamental questioning of what seems natural and inevitable. You start examining the things you believe about yourself. Where did those beliefs come from? You start looking at the should that govern your life. Who decided those should? You start noticing the voice in your head that judges you constantly, that says you're not enough or you're too much, and you start asking, whose voice is that really? This isn't comfortable. It means sitting with a lot of uncertainty. It means acknowledging that many of the things you thought were just you, your personality, your preferences, your values, might actually be the residue of systems and structures that shaped you. But this questioning opens up space for something Foucault calls the aesthetics of existence. This is the idea that you can approach your life the way an artist approaches a canvas, not by following a predetermined plan or trying to copy someone else's masterpiece, but by experimenting, by trying things out, by developing a kind of craftsmanship in how you live. This doesn't mean life becomes easy or that you suddenly know exactly who you want to be. It means you start taking responsibility for your own formation. You start asking, not just what do I have to do, but what kind of person do I want to become through doing this? You start choosing your practices deliberately. Maybe you realize that the morning routine you've been following, because some productivity guru said it would optimize your performance, actually makes you miserable, and you give yourself permission to do something else, something that feels nurturing rather than disciplining. Maybe you start saying no to commitments that you only took on because saying yes seemed like what a good person would do. Maybe you start seeking out conversations and relationships where you can be honest rather than impressive, where you can show up as uncertain and searching rather than polished and together. The key thing that Foucault emphasizes is that this work is never finished. You're not trying to arrive at some final perfected version of yourself. You're engaging in an ongoing practice of self-care, not care in the self-indulgent sense, but care in the sense of attending to your own existence with seriousness and intention. This is what he means when he talks about the care of the self, borrowing from ancient philosophy. It's about treating yourself as a project worthy of your attention, not in order to become someone society will approve of more, but in order to become someone you can actually be. And here's the paradox that makes this whole thing work. The more you do this work, the more you question and experiment and craft yourself deliberately, the less you care about external validation. Not because you've become some sort of enlightened being who's transcended the need for recognition, but Because you've found a different source of meaning. The work itself becomes meaningful. The process of becoming becomes its own reward. You stop needing life to be anything other than what it is, because you're actively engaged in making it something. And before I go further, I need to pause here and ask you something directly. Have you felt this? This sense that you're living according to a script you never chose? Because I know that when you're in the middle of it, when you're performing the version of yourself that you think you're supposed to be, it feels incredibly lonely. You look around and everyone else seems to have it figured out, seems to be actually the person they're presenting to the world. And you think, what's wrong with me? Why am I the only one who feels like a fraud in my own life? But here's what I want you to understand. You're not alone in this. There are thousands of people watching this video right now who feel exactly the same disconnection, the same sense of being constructed rather than choosing, the same exhaustion from maintaining a performance. So do me a favor, go down to the comments and write just this. Write, I'm living according to a script I didn't choose. You don't need to explain anything, you don't need to tell your whole story. Just that one sentence, because when you write that, you're not just acknowledging your own experience, you're telling someone else who's going to read your comment that they're not crazy, that this feeling is real and shared. And maybe that acknowledgement is exactly what someone needs today to start questioning their own script. The beautiful and difficult truth is that once you start this work of self-creation, you can't really go back. You might try. You might get scared of the uncertainty and try to retreat back into the old patterns, the old ways of being that felt safer because they were familiar. But something's changed. You've seen behind the curtain. You know now that the solid ground you thought you were standing on was always just a construction. And knowing that changes everything. What you're experiencing isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. Not in the sense that everything suddenly becomes clear and perfect, but in the sense that a barrier has broken, a wall has come down, and now there's space for something new to emerge. Foucault calls this the critical ontology of ourselves, this ongoing investigation into what we are and what we might become. And the reason it's called critical is because it never accepts any answer as final. It keeps asking, keeps probing, keeps making space for change. This is how you get free, not all at once, not through dramatic moment of liberation, but through this patient, persistent work of examining yourself, questioning yourself, remaking yourself. If you've stayed with me this far, if you're still here thinking about these ideas and how they apply to your own life, then I know something about you. You're not looking for quick fixes or easy answers. You're looking for something real, something that actually addresses the depth of what you're experiencing. And this channel exists for exactly that, for people who are willing to do the hard work of thinking deeply about their own existence, who aren't satisfied with surface-level solutions to fundamental questions. Every week, I create content exploring these intersections of philosophy and lived experience, using thinkers like Foucault to help us understand our contemporary struggles with identity, freedom, meaning, and transformation. If you want to continue this journey of philosophical self-examination, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Not because I need the numbers, but because you deserve to have a space where you can think differently, question freely, and explore what it means to create yourself rather than be created. And if this video resonated with something true in you, leave a like so that others who are struggling with these same questions can find this content. You're not alone in wanting to live a life that's actually yours. What's emerging in you right now, this restlessness, this dissatisfaction with just going through the motions, this hunger for something more authentic and alive? This isn't a problem to be solved. It's a door opening. It's your existence calling you back to itself, inviting you to step out of the passenger seat and take the wheel. But taking the wheel doesn't mean having a clear destination or a detailed map. It means being willing to drive without knowing exactly where you're going, being willing to make the road by walking it, as the poet says. It means accepting that you'll make mistakes, that you'll take wrong turns, that sometimes you'll feel more lost than you did when you were following someone else's directions. But at least you'll be lost in a way that's yours, moving in a direction that you chose, even if you're not sure where it leads. The question isn't whether you're ready for this. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have watched this far if some part of you wasn't already reaching for it. The question is whether you're willing to start, knowing that starting means leaving behind the security of the known, even if the known was making you miserable. It means being uncomfortable for a while, maybe for a long while, as you learn to trust yourself, as you develop new ways of being that feel strange at first because they're actually yours rather than borrowed. But that strangeness is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're doing it right, that you're finally stepping out of the mold that was formed for you and starting to take your own shape. And yes, it will be messy. Self-creation is always messier than self-maintenance. Following someone else's blueprint is much tidier than designing your own. But tidy isn't the same as alive, and you didn't come this far to settle for tidy. So here you are, at 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, whenever this message finds you, and you have a choice. You can close this video and go back to scrolling, go back to the comfortable numbness of distraction. Tell yourself that maybe someday you'll deal with this feeling, this hunger for a life that's actually yours, or you can take this moment as the beginning, not the beginning of having everything figured out, but the beginning of asking the questions that matter. Who am I becoming? Is this who I want to become? What practices, what choices, what relationships are shaping me, and are they shaping me into someone I actually want to be? These aren't questions with simple answers, but they're the questions that make a life worth living. They're the questions that transform you from a product into a creator, from someone who is lived by their circumstances into someone who lives deliberately with intention and awareness. The remarkable thing about this moment, about right now as you're hearing these words, is that nothing has to change externally for everything to shift internally. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow or end your relationships or move to a new city. The revolution happens first in how you see, in how you understand your own existence. You start to recognize that the voice in your head that's been criticizing you constantly, telling you you're not enough, that voice isn't you. It's the internalized voice of all the systems that needed you to be smaller, more manageable, more predictable. And once you recognize it, you can start to talk back to it, to question it, to decide whether its standards are ones you actually agree with. You start to notice the ways you perform yourself in different contexts, and instead of judging yourself for that, you get curious about it. Who is this performance for? What happens if I stop performing, even for a moment? What would I say or do if I wasn't worried about how it would be received? This is the work, not dramatic or Instagram-worthy, but profound in its ordinariness. It's choosing to be honest in a conversation when being strategic would be easier. It's allowing yourself to want something, even if it doesn't make sense to want it. It's letting yourself be seen as uncertain, as searching, as not having all the answers. It's finding small ways every day to practice being yourself, whatever that means right now, knowing that what it means will change, that you'll change, that the self you're creating today is just a draft, not a final version. And that's okay, because you're not trying to arrive at some perfect finished form. You're just trying to be alive, really alive, awake to your own existence rather than sleepwalking through someone else's idea of what your existence should be. If you're seeing this, if these words found you today of all days, maybe it's because you needed to hear that the discomfort you've been feeling, that sense that something isn't right, even though everything looks fine from the outside, that's not a sign you're failing at life. It's a sign you're ready for something more true, more yours. This is your invitation, not to become someone different, but to stop being someone you're not, to let go of the exhausting work of maintaining a self that was never really you to begin with. And yes, letting go is scary because it means stepping into uncertainty, into not knowing who you'll be or what your life will look like on the other side. But you already know what the alternative is. You've been living it, and some part of you, the part that made you stop scrolling, the part that made you watch this video, that part already knows you can't go back to sleep. The door is open now, and even if you wanted to, you can't unsee what you've seen. So you might as well walk through it, one uncertain step at a time, into a life that's messier but realer, harder but more yours, unknown but finally alive.